imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total Protonic Reversal.
Protonic Reversal.
Protonic Reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rock about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharp nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to go my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And take that away.
Yeah, that's my take. What's yours?
Protonic Reversal!
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed, indeed, indeed. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact. We are all up in your face. It is time, yet again, for the one, the only,
Protonic Reversal.
and welcome to it. If you already are here, we appreciate that as well. Thank you for sticking around. If not, welcome to the show. I always appreciate new folks coming in. Got a doubleheader today. This one, it's a return guest, but a great one. One of my favorite guitar players of all time, Mr. Duane Denison of the Jesus Lizard. Denison Kemble Trio, Tomahawk. Really awesome player, awesome guy. Really interesting fella. So we're going to get right to it. I'm going to play a song first, and I'm going to come back and talk to Mr. Duane Denison. Thanks to everyone for sharing the show around. Thanks to everyone that's been sharing the show around. To folks, that's how people find out about it. It's highly appreciated. Again, the Patreon, patreon.com/Protonic Reversal. Get the episodes quicker if that's a thing that you want. If it's not a thing you want, you don't have to do it. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding. Plain and simple. That's where we're at. That's what it is. Okay? Sounds good? It's all right? It's all right. that was a little band called the Jesus Lizard, and on the phone with me right now, we have none other than Mr. Duane Denison. Duane, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Conan. How you doing?
Good, dude. Getting through in these very weird times. It's
Yes, indeed.
It's nice. People seem to be getting some value out of the talks, and the show gives people something to do. Gives me something to do, so that's always nice. But there's a lot of rest and anxiety in the world, and that's not unique to me. But how are you doing? That's the question.
As well as can be expected. I've been sort of idle for a month, but it hasn't been killing me, to be honest. I've kind of. I guess I'm in a position where I'm not desperate for money right now, so I'm not hurting that way, and having a time off to just kind of take a break and not have to work so hard and do so many different things is kind of nice in a way. I've been practicing more and doing weird, it's been a little dull. I'm at home with my wife and my daughter.
Right.
And my wife works from home. And so, I do some music stuff in the day and maybe take a walk or work out or something and watch TV, listen to music, put puzzles together and stuff like that and read. And, it's getting a little dull, and we have to watch we don't get on each other's nerves.
Right.
And watching we're not, running through things too quickly, food, supplies, that kind of thing, kind of pacing ourselves, rationing ourselves. I'm sure everyone probably is doing the same thing out there. So, we're coping.
And do you find that other people in the community around you are kind of reacting the same way? Are people treating it seriously? Are people abiding by the edicts to not go out and behave as if things were normal?
It seems like it. It seems like it took a couple weeks, at least here in Nashville, for people to take it seriously. And it was kind of distressing because we could see there were pockets of resistance. I don't know if it's because where they're getting their news from, or if they think this is some sort of conspiracy to, make the economy bad or whatever it is. But I think people,
Yeah, no, I'm laughing, but it's not funny at all. But I know exactly what you're talking about, unfortunately.
Yeah, but it seems to be there's definitely a lot less traffic, and I don't see groups of people doing things and as it should be, I suppose. So I think we'll be turning the corner soon. I think the way things are projecting, my wife keeps up on this more than I do, but the cases are rounding the corner, but I think the deaths are going to keep going up for a while.
Yeah.
People who are already sick and this and that. So unfortunately, so we'll see. I would hope that in a way this is a learning experience for people, if nothing else. And, it should be, right? You should get something out of this. How our lives are so dependent upon the goods and services provided by certain people that we take for granted, right?
Yeah.
There's that. And also, it's kind of good if everyone just sort of steps back and takes it easy for a while and, don't step off the rat race for a while, step off the wheel if you can, and just sort of mellow out a little bit, take a breather, become a little more meditative or contemplative if you can. I realize some people are just absolutely strapped, and that's unfortunate, especially financially, and that this is just killing people, wiping them out, and that's very unfortunate. I empathize. I was in that boat for a long time myself. Yeah. And I'm fortunate in that my musically, so I've got some recording projects that are in the works. I didn't have any shows. I didn't have any shows canceled. I didn't have anything like that affect me, and I'm fortunate that way.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's actually relatively rare. It seems like it's it's affected a lot of people in music in that way, and it seems to be a very common story. So I'm not gonna not going to say that was lucky, because obviously there's nothing lucky about it, but it's definitely could have been worse if you had tour dates to cancel, of course.
Yeah. I'm in a different position than I was a few years ago. I've been working in the public library system of Nashville. So, we're shut down for a while, but it's not wiping me out. We'll be back soon enough, I'm sure. In past years, this is the busiest time of year. This is right when the touring season is starting.
Right.
And into the fall and early winter. And, for a lot of people, especially, you would time it to have your album out and all that kind of stuff. And this is really ruining a lot of musicians. It's unfortunate, especially if you're making a living very precariously and barely getting by. I'm older. I've got some savings. I'm not as wiped out by it. So.
Yeah, and it's something where, and of course, this show's a music focus show. We talk to and about musicians, but there are many other industries that are just flat out getting decimated with this, and it's terrifying. I think justifiably terrifying at that.
It is. I think about, I have friends like restaurant things and wait staff things and hotel. Everyone knows about the restaurant world and the club world and the airlines and that, but just the other day I was thinking, what about all these hotels?
Totally empty.
Work in the hotel and it's empty.
Yeah.
And they're what do they do? I think some people may have to scramble and find themselves some at least temporary employment in the delivery. It seems like the delivery service is bigger. It's humping right now. That whole world, grocery delivery, food delivery. Yes, it's unfortunate, but it's kind of a go-to thing for a lot of people that I've seen around here anyway. So, I don't know. You try to make do. I've been giving guitar lessons online through this company, Lesson Face, that I've been associated with for a few years. And so that's kind of, gives people who want to take lessons something to do and things to work on, and it gives me something to do and a little bit of income. So,
right, and that was relatively new when I talked to you last, which was sometime back. And do you find it still like, are there people looking to learn Jesus Lizard songs? Is it, mostly are people trying to find ways out of maybe corners that they feel like they painted themselves into creatively?
So far, my new batch of students, it's more like guys who have been playing guitar for a while, who are familiar with, Jesus Lizard, Tomahawk, who want just a new direction. And I know, and I've got exactly what they need, like as far as exercises and things that I like to think are conceptually interesting and physically sort of demanding as well. And so these are things I've collected over the decades and have written out and all that stuff. So.
And you've there's a few of those that are up for free as well, like just sort of, whether it's, teasers or just kind of give you an idea of what kind of thing you can expect. There's a few things that you've had that are up there that I thought was pretty fascinating, that you can get a kind of feel for like what the way a preview to a movie might be.
Sure.
Before the experience.
Some of those, sort of brief tutorial things are out there. Yeah, there's a few freebies out there. I'll probably do some more at some point, but one thing at a time.
And so you alluded to the fact that you had some stuff that you were working on. Is there anything that you're working on that you can speak to right now?
Yeah, sure. There's a Tomahawk album that's in the works.
Nice.
And the songs are there. Most of it is tracked. Right now, we are working on, Mike is laying down vocals and doing some different things. And so after that, it will get mixed and mastered and released. I don't know when. I'm hoping this year sometime. But, this has been in the works for a couple of years. It's taken time. For various reasons, but I think we're in the home stretch. We still have to get it together, artwork and things like that, but it's happening, and so that there is definitely some new Tomahawk in the in the not too distant future.
And of course, at this point, I believe Mike would have been out with Faith No More if things were different right now.
I think so.
Yeah, and I know that specifically because I had Billy Gould on just recently, and he mentioned that extemporaneously, and I saw after his episode went up that indeed those dates have been, we'll just say postponed, but are not happening anytime soon.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So this is going to be the first Tomahawk thing since Oddfellows, right? Which is the one with Trevor.
Yeah, in the 2012. Yeah, and Trevor's on this one as well. So definitely. Yeah. So yeah, it's been a while, but everybody's got other things going, I guess.
Yeah. And so, are there plans for? Assuming that we are allowed to tour again, are there plans to take it on the road at some point?
There is no plans for anything beyond that.
Right.
I think it's just aiming on finishing it and getting it out.
Yeah.
No, we haven't. It's not outside the realm of possibilities, certainly enough, but nobody's really planning on anything yet. So I leave it open. Knowing from the history of the band, even if we won't necessarily make any plans or talk about it, but then once the album comes out, people will be interested and offers will start coming in.
Right.
And as they had, for instance, for the Jesus Lizard, even years and years after the fact.
Sure.
And eventually they just get hard to ignore. You can't come up with any more reasons to not do it.
Right, the justification.
Yeah, you justify not doing something.
Right.
The fact that, you feel fortunate because you said there is an actual demand for what you do, and that's a very lucky position to be in. Very fortunate. So eventually you say, well, okay, we'll go do these things. So we'll see what happens.
And it's fascinating to think about because, just the last few weeks seem like months, right? Like my sense of time is all askew now.
Yeah.
But last time I had you on, you had just broken the news that the Jesus Lizard was back to playing shows again.
Was that like 2009 or something?
No, it was when you did this last round you did. It was
okay. We did some we did the 2009 did a big worldwide thing. Then we laid out for a while, and then we did some in 2017, 2018. And the very end of last year, like between Christmas and New Year's.
Right. So it was like June 2017, maybe. That seems about right.
Okay.
And it seemed like I unfortunately was not able to attend any of those, but it seems like those shows all went well. There was a whole new generation of folks who got to see what the Jesus Lizard could throw down. How was that experience, especially compared to the last go round and the first time?
Still great. We still, enjoy playing together, and I think we still sound really good, if I may say so myself. We get together, and within a day or two of rehearsal, we start sounding like ourselves again, and it seems like it's not the first, you can practice on your own at home all you want, but when you get together and play those songs, it's a different thing.
Right.
And if you haven't played together in, say, a couple of years, you seem like you're fighting to just get the feel right. Even if everyone's playing the parts right, it has to all line up in a certain way that the feel is there. And it's a very organic thing. And it only comes from time. And so, but then I found that with us, within a day or two, it felt like it wasn't work anymore. Like we didn't have to over-concentrate to make something sound good. And that's where we want to be. And so, and then the shows, once again, playing in front of audiences too, that's a different thing. And what we found that within a show or within one show, it was back where it should be. And in some ways, these reunion shows, I might even say, though I don't really study live recordings, I'm not a fan of doing that. In some ways, they're better than maybe even in some ways than the old days, because maybe we take it. Well, I always took it seriously, but people just aren't drinking as much and aren't doing drugs as much. I mean, we were never really heavy.
Sure, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying.
We were never. I thought we liked to party, but we were pretty good about reining it in when we had to. But when you're younger, you test your limits maybe more often, and you pay for it. You pay the price.
Yeah.
With these later shows, we knew that people really they were taking it seriously, and we had a legacy to live up to, as well as the fact of being older, and you can't do those things anymore. You just can't, you won't take it. You can't get up there and do your best when you're hurting day after day. So in some ways, it was maybe even tighter and more focused than even the old days. So there's a trade-off there to be had. When you're young and crazy and there's a certain manic sort of energy or grind or whatever you want to call it,
sure,
that you only have for so long. But then with experience comes other things, and you're patient, and you let things sort of reach their own like velocity on its own, and you have confidence that it will, and you don't worry within a song or two. It doesn't seem like it sounds that good. Like what it will, just relax. Let the songs play themselves.
Yeah,
and you'll be fine. Take your ego out of it and let the group's vibe take over. And I think when you get older, you think. At least I find myself thinking that way.
And did you find that some of this stuff was almost like muscle memory when it came time to coming back to it?
Some of it was, and some of it wasn't. There's always, I think with any band, you've got your repertoire, and some songs are easier than others, and usually there's maybe just a part or two that is tricky in songs, and those are the ones that you have to focus on a little more. We're not the kind of band where every song is difficult. You know what I mean? Like a really proggy band or a band that has, we have a fair amount of time changes and this and that, but we're still a rock band. There's still a lot of 4/4 and a lot of, chunking the chords out and grind repetition.
But there's weird syncopation and things like that. I mean, there's different things to make it interesting and vital, but yeah, it's ultimately
yes, of course.
Hard, yeah.
Of course. So some of it you have to concentrate a bit more than others. And then you have to catch yourself. And a lot of times mistakes happen when it's a mental thing because you're not paying attention because you say, oh, this is an easy one. And you find yourself, looking at the audience or thinking about something. Your mind wanders. Next thing you know, you've missed the change.
Right. Like, whoops.
So, and that, I can honestly say that didn't happen to me once in any of the recent shows.
Good.
And, and I don't recall it really hearing it anywhere. Maybe David Yao a little bit here and there, but that's his thing. That's part of his thing. And he's always pretty good about catching up.
Right. And
coming back around. So, whatever. I don't mind if a band is really laying it down and sounding good and having, and rocking out. I don't mind if things run off the rails a little bit here and there. I think that makes it cool. That makes it show that it's real.
Yeah.
And that it's just not scripted, and they're not playing to tracks, and it's not pre-recorded, and et cetera, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's soul to it. There's it ebbs and flows. It can sway in the way that only a live show can versus just playing a record very loud. And
yeah.
I certainly, I find a lot of value in that personally, and I find that the best bands are bands that, like, maybe they're not going to be, 100% like letter perfect on everything, and you wouldn't want them to be, because sometimes those little things can actually make it more of a vital experience and like remind you that you're in this ephemeral moment that, in some cases will never happen again. Yeah.
For instance, here in Nashville, my wife works in music business too, and occasionally I will accompany her to go see something like a showcase or something, often country acts or up and coming sort of things. And, and it just, they almost always annoy me. And I
sure.
I think, this is supposed to be a country band. Why aren't you more of a badass? Why aren't you? Or I'm seeing this is supposed to be a rock band. I haven't heard one person scream. I haven't seen anything get broken. I haven't seen anyone fall down, or any equipment malfunction. Like what I like the random accidents.
Yeah.
Part of it, and something to sort of make it show that it's not 100% perfect. And you shouldn't try to do that, because the only way that you're going to have those really perfect things is if you're being kind of cautious, and when you're overly cautious, it just kind of sucks the life out of it.
Yeah, and it feels like, well, and I think people that come from, for lack of a better term, like a DIY or punk rock background are going to be more appreciative of the vitality that can bring versus,
Sure.
I don't necessarily know too much about, the Nashville music scene or what a country band would or would not care for, but it almost seems like it's a wasted opportunity for some of these artists to not tap into that, to want that like sort of clinical perfectionism or be buying into this idea of whatever is on the radio, the commercial radio or whatnot. I mean, do you find that's a mindset down there, or am I just projecting about all of this?
There's different things at play when I see people in situations. Sometimes I think it's just the backup band are just mercenaries, and
hired guns.
They're hired and they just want to play well so that they can move up to a better gig, or their local got pros and they just want to demonstrate their skills for the sake of getting more endorsements, or that kind of thinking. And that's utterly foreign. If you've come out of a punk rock or underground do-it-yourself scene, that would have never entered the equation. You want to do something unique, original, exciting, and that's what counts. And if you get some goodies out of it along the way and get your props and whatever, fine. Take advantage of it. Sure, I have. But that's not what you're going for. You're not trying to get in magazines. If you do, great.
Right.
Sure, take advantage of it, but that's not the goal.
Should be the goal, right?
Yeah, and we have, even as a guitar player, there's parts that are intricate where I like to try to play them perfectly every time, and that is the goal of certain things. But other things, it's not. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be sort of loose and noisy and chaotic, and especially with a singer like David Yao, if something was if we were very clinical and processed and all that, it would just sound awful.
It would be a different band. Yeah. It wouldn't work. Well, and that's something that's kind of interesting with Tomahawk too, is obviously David Yao and Mike Patton are both very skilled frontmen and skilled vocalists, but they're very different styles. So it seems like it allows the songwriting. Be more, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you like if you were to make like a diagram of it, they would be on diametric sides of the circle. But it seems like this you allow the songwriting to go different places because of that.
Yeah, in a way, sure. In a way, it's not that different. Typically, if I'm writing something, whatever I'm writing in the time is for whatever project is the most pressing at that time. I don't usually think about, it usually works out that way where, hey, this is better for this guy than for that guy. But I don't ever set out to do it. I just typically will just set out to come up with new things.
Yeah,
and find a way to make it work.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you ever So your skills as a guitar player are well known to be iconoclastic, if you will, and that's my words. You don't have to agree with that. I'm throwing that on you. Okay. But there are folks that have taken a lot of influence from certain parts of your playing. And certain bands that have made key things of, especially some of the more key eras of the Jesus Lizard work, they've brought that into their playing. Do you hear that influence? If you hear those bands, are you aware of this at all?
Not so much anymore. I suppose I did a bit here and there for a while. I would hear bits and pieces of things that I thought might have been influenced by us, more like rhythmic patterns.
Okay.
Maybe a certain type of trying to do something harmonically that was a little more jarring than what you typically might do, or maybe they try to have the vocals be a little more loose in and out of time, but I don't really hear that angle so much. It's more from the musical side. Not so much anymore. Plus, I just don't go out to see bands as much as I used to.
Right.
I'm older. I got a kid in school, et cetera, et cetera. So I just can't. And I don't have the time. But the music I listen to, I still listen to a fair amount of music, but most of it isn't even rock anymore. So I'm confessing here.
It's okay.
So every once in a while, someone will say, "Hey, have you heard these guys? Check it out." And I'll go, "Oh, okay." It doesn't bother me or interest me either way. You know what I mean? I would hope so. I would expect it because I was the same way. When I was younger, I would pick up things from listening or seeing various bands, little things here and there from lots of different bands would make an impression on me, and then they sneak in. And sometimes they're sneaking; those influences are sneaking in without you even realizing it.
Right.
And it's funny to me. I think one of the worst things you can do, not worst thing, but whatever, if you ask musicians of what their influences are, they never tell the truth. They never do. They never do, because
Penderecki and Hank Williams and okay.
Yes,
whatever.
they're always mentioning these far-flung, exotic, rarefied names, and the reality is, you go to their house and they've got Cheap Trick in the CD player, or they've got Bow Wow Wow. They've got a Bow Wow Wow tape in their car.
Right.
And stuff like that. And and they're talking about the art ensemble of Chicago and Stockhausen.
Yeah.
And you look at, and he's got a George Benson thing in his car. And a lot of times the influences are subconscious. They sneak in without knowing it. You write something, and you don't realize it sounds like something else until much later. And the only thing you got to watch with that is if you've written something or a series or a batch of songs and you're listening to a demo tape, recording, whatever, if it starts to remind you of something and it reminds you of things you don't like, then you better get rid of it.
Right.
You better,
that's a bad
sign. You better
sign.
dump that shit as quickly as possible.
That's certainly a sign. It's just a bad one, and you should heed the warning.
Or you're listening to it, and your friend says, "Oh man, this one's cool. It sounds like the second Thin Lizzy album." You're like,
no, does it?
Okay. All right. Not that I don't hate Thin Lizzy, but I don't think that's necessarily a good thing to try to be. Everyone's Stooges, this and that. It's like, oh no, you don't. Anyway,
I used to say I love Thin Lizzy is a band that I love so much. I aggressively try to not sound like them. It's like one of those things where you want to honor something awesome by not just ripping it off. And
yes,
I certainly
by letting them own it.
Yeah, and for me, I certainly have a sort of phobia of unintentionally even ripping something off. Just coming up with something and be like, "Oh, that's great. Did I write that? Like, where did that come from?"
Yeah, but then, sometimes I think if you really, really like a certain sound or a certain style, and you've thought about what it is you like about it, and if you can somehow take it to somewhere that they didn't, then that's okay.
Yeah.
That's
worthwhile.
Develop it.
Right.
Take it to a new place or the next level or whatever you want to call it. Don't just, ape it. And sometimes it's hard not to sound, because that's what you like. Those are the things you like.
Yeah.
And, if you're especially for guitar, it's got 6 strings and you run it through an amp, unless you're just doing something radically different tuning or whatever, some of that is inevitable. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. But when it's, an obvious, blatant copy.
Civil War reenactor.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, and that sort of, it's almost like, how they used to define pornography, when you see it, right? It's like there's a difference between taking influence and doing something with it versus just shamelessly aping something that came before.
Yeah, and the nice and the reassuring thing, at least about that, is that everyone does it. It's not just a rock thing.
Right.
Composers do it. Jazz musicians do it. I hear it all the time, and they're the first. And some of them would admit it. And I don't know if it was Stravinsky who said, if you copy one person, you're a plagiarist. If you copy many, you're a genius. And
right, yeah.
You are the sum of your influences. And to me, learning how to make music, it's like learning how to speak. You imitate what's around you until you find your own thing, and it's a combination of things around you. And it used to be everyone's things were different depending on where you lived, but then everything has become so homogenized through, first it was radio stations became nationalized, like one company would own all the big rock stations in all the big cities, and then it went to satellite, and then it went to MTV and things like that, where the same music was everywhere. And it didn't quite used to be like that. Even when I was a kid, because I'm 61, growing up in the Detroit area, the radio stations there played things that they didn't play in other cities, or maybe it was regional. I think like Detroit, Cleveland, Chicago were kind of on the same wavelength. New York, Boston, Philly were kind of in the same wavelength. You had regional hits and regional stars,
yep.
And then some got bigger. And that, I don't think it's not the same. And that era is gone. So whatever.
It's certainly not the same on that larger level. I mean, I think you can get a little bit of that with these sort of smaller and smaller circles that kind of develop their own unique taste, but it has nothing to do with regionality, and there's certainly no greater reach. So it's a cruel irony because there's instant availability for everything, but it's also just a fire hose of, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as they say, right?
Yeah. Oh well.
And that's a state of affairs. That's just where we're at. Like it's not like it's anything.
Yeah, I mean, there's still. I guess you just have to go out more and and have a local scene,
right?
Where bands influence each other, people influence each other, just based on that, and then maybe it grows from there. In the old punk rock days, it seemed like every town had its own scene, its own stars, if you will,
right.
Its own local stars who were influence leaders. It's funny, all these things have the new terminology for things that we've all seen all our lives.
It's
like
been the same,
influencers.
Right, yeah.
Influence. You mean people who influential personalities,
yeah.
Strong person? Yeah. Oh, gee, I don't know what that is. Or the one that kills me is sweat equity.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean working your ass off for nothing for a long time in order to make something happen? Gee, well, what is that like? All these ridiculous terms.
Would you mind speaking to the Duane Denison chassis from the electrical guitar company and tell us a little bit about how that guitar came to pass?
Oh, if you want to guitar geek out for a minute here.
Yeah, it's not a gear podcast or anything, but the folks do like some of the gear talk, as do I. So. Okay.
Well, when I was in the Jesus Lizard early on, I got kind of introduced. Well, actually, let's go before that. I was aware and have owned various aluminum-based guitars for a long time. And back in the late 70s, I think, even before I was even in college, I had what back then was an early Kramer that had an aluminum neck, very heavy, very awkward, very poorly balanced. Sounded great, but it was kind of hard to use. Got rid of it. Kind of got away from it for a few years. Now I'm in Chicago, the Jesus Lizard, recording with Steve Albini, and he has this odd guitar with an aluminum neck. And what's that? It's a Travis Bean. They were partners with Kramer, and he broke off and this and that. Played it, and I really liked it, and I liked the sound. There were others available. It seems like for some reason in the Midwest, Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, there was a lot of those around, and they weren't expensive. They weren't desirable. So I bought a couple of them back then for, under $600.
Right. Which is absurd for people that are not familiar with current prices. It's completely absurd.
They're like 6,000. Yeah. They're thousands now. And the same with the amplifier I had in the early days of the Jesus Lizard. I played high watts, which are, hand-wired English amplifiers, and you couldn't give them away at that time. Everyone was playing other things. And I had like a vintage, like beautiful condition one, for $500, the whole thing. And now it would be $5,000 for that whole thing. Anyway, so I played those on and off for a while. And I still had some of the problems that I had run into with the Kramer and like weight and balance and this and that. So 20-some years ago when I moved to Nashville, I sold a lot of stuff off. And I said, okay, I'm moving to a new town, playing with some new people. I'm going to start a new life and get some new gear. And that's what I did. And this went on for a while. And then when we started, the word got out, we were going to do some Jesus Lizard reunion shows around 2009. I was approached by Kevin Burkett, who is the owner and operator of the EGC Electrical Guitar Company. And he said, I understand you don't have any of your Travis Beans. He says, I make aluminum guitars. The entire body and neck are aluminum. And I had heard of them before, like other people doing that, Valeno and others. And he says, I'd like to make you one. And so we actually talked about specs. I had worked at Gibson Guitar Company for a year back in 2005. And so I knew a thing or two about what I wanted and about design and what I was looking for. Weight, balance, the angle of the neck, all this. And so he actually listened to me, Kevin did, at Electrical, and we came up with this model, my model, called the Chessie. And so I've got a couple of them. And, it's all aluminum, semi-hollow. You can get your choice of pickups, humbucker, P90 style. And they just sound great. And we really worked on getting the weight and balance and feel to where it was more like how I thought it should be. After working at Gibson, I noticed some designs just felt better than others and played better, had better intonation, and there was definite reasons for it. And I felt like I want to apply that to this. And so we did. And so that's what I've been playing. And his company seems to be doing quite well. From what I understand, he's always behind and has to work really hard to keep up with the demand for those things. And other people are starting to play them too. Not necessarily my Chessies, but like Buzz Osborne is a big electrical guitar company, EGC user. I think Steve Albini has one or two, and there's others out there all the time.
Buzz uses one, and Melvin's. There's a whole bunch of folks that utilize. I mean, I have one myself also. Like they're wonderful.
Okay.
It's I have a custom.
There's a very interesting to me kind of a subset of the music and the hard rock, whatever metal underground world that is into those type of guitars, and there's a little movement of it, and EGC seems to be at the epicenter of it. And there's other companies too, from what I hear. I haven't tried their stuff. I'm happy with what they've made. I think it's really good. They sound great, feel great. It's different, and it's kind of cool, isn't it? I have, there's mixed feelings. Some people, traditionalists don't want to let go of wood, and I understand, and wood is great, and I still have other wood guitars, obviously, and
you're allowed to have both, as it turns out.
Yes, and I don't think it's a question of sustainability or the ecological side of it, because nowadays any guitar company, or really any furniture company, whatever, anyone building things from wood, that stuff is pretty carefully sourced. Yeah. All that stuff is grown on farms, and it's pretty highly regulated at this point. So you're not necessarily saving the world by not playing wood. You know what I mean? And if you think about it, aluminum has to be extracted from the ground and processed and all that too. It's not like it doesn't grow on trees. Yeah. So, I don't think that is a question at all. It's just something different that has unique sound qualities that once you start playing them and getting used to hearing it, you find that they really work well for certain types of music. And I think that's why so many of us are fans.
Drawn to it. And I think that, so there's like the Denison neck too. Can you just very quickly explain how that's different than the standard?
How that's different is I wanted a chunkier neck similar to that of a Gibson ES-135, which I'm a big fan of. But in order to keep the weight down and the balance, we had to make it hollow. So the neck and body are hollow. There's a solid there's a block in the middle that the pickups are mounted on. So it's considered, I would consider it a semi hollow body guitar. It's not totally hollow.
It's got the resonance of it,
itself,
but yeah.
and the neck is chambered as well to make it lighter and to help with the balance between the bout of the body of the guitar and the neck of the guitar. Oftentimes with aluminum, in the past with me, aluminum neck guitars could often be neck heavy. And when you're standing there with the guitar on a strap, it would dip. It would do what we call a neck dive. And it would be hard to control it when you're playing, very awkward. And so we've managed to avoid that.
I was going to say, I remember those especially with the Series 1s when Kevin was just kind of getting things online. I was like, this is fantastic. And I would probably accidentally hurt someone if I ever played this regularly.
Yeah.
Cool. I appreciate you going into that. Again, this isn't like a gear podcast or anything, but people do, it's interesting. And as far as having, a signature instrument, it's a fantastic instrument, and it's very kind of cool and mysterious looking if you're not in the know.
Yeah. It doesn't look obviously, depending on the finish and that, but the chassis don't, to me, look obviously aluminum. It's got the one that I have, the tip, the white, and then they have the fingerboard has an acrylic sort of finish on it, dark, so it almost, from a distance, you would just think it was a standard wood guitar, but it's not.
Yeah, and it's something where, did you find that you modulated your way of playing very quickly with it, or was there any modulation required at all as far as
nothing at all. For playing rock and for certain types of chords, certain types of patterns, it just seems to work really well. I think they could probably work for most anything, though. It's funny. I've been playing since I've been home and I have the time in quarantine. I sometimes, when I practice, I'll play along with these jazz play-alongs, different things. Like, this is the Coltrane set, or this is the Thelonious Monk set, or this is just an all-blues collection. And when I play the chassis clean with a dark sort of jazz sound, it sounds pretty good. It sounds good even like that. It has a very sort of clear, ringing sort of, the overtones are very pure. It doesn't sound like a typical, like, woody vintage jazz guitar, but it still sounds pretty good to me. And the other thing that we haven't mentioned about those things is when you're traveling a lot, especially if you're flying,
yes,
you can throw that thing in a flight case and you throw it in the plane, and I don't give it a second thought.
You don't have to worry about it. It's made of the same stuff as the airplane. it's
yeah,
great.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't worry about it. And that's a good thing.
Definitely, and it's something where, and again, I'm not welcoming Electrical Guitar Company as a sponsor or anything, but I just think it's really interesting for a player such as yourself that's been around for a while. Getting that input is, vital for someone just like curious about that. So,
yeah, it was nice.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
It's nice to be able to. No, I'm sorry. No, it was just nice to be able to have some input on a couple of details.
You can call the guy up that's making the guitar. That's fantastic. You don't try getting that in another custom shop. Like, to have the input of like the design and every element of it. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, I am always leery of repeating subjects when I've had folks on before, but I honestly don't remember if we talked about this before. Denison Kimball Trio was my introduction to Ornette Coleman.
Okay.
In a cool way. And I really, I quite favor those records, the Denison Kimball Trio and the DK3 stuff. Do you consider that a closed book as far as any iteration of that group, or is that something you think you might come back someday?
I don't know exactly. I don't really talk to Jim very much, Kimball, anymore. We just have different lives, separate lives. I certainly, don't have any reason. There's no ill will, but there's nothing like that going on. I just, we just don't really talk that much. I sort of miss doing that kind of a thing, where I would never be so have the nerve to say call myself a jazz guitarist. That was a somewhat of a reasonable facsimile, I guess you could say. It was sort of jazz-ish, jazzy, in the same way that maybe other things that I liked from back then, whether it was the Lounge Lizards or some of Mark Rebo's stuff. Where it gave me a chance to do things that I just didn't get to do with the Jesus Lizard, which improvise more and just play a little more intimately, play a little quieter, cleaner, and experiment with some different things. And it started off just as a indie soundtrack project, and then we actually played live, and it actually kind of worked. Next thing I know, we're on tour opening for Morphine, playing 1,000-seat places, playing jazz festivals.
Yeah,
we played jazz festivals. We didn't go out and ask for this stuff. It came to us just from those albums.
Yeah.
And so there's a part of me I wouldn't mind revisiting it, and but at this point it's all it's practicalities too. With the Jesus or Tomahawk, let's face it, those bands, they make enough money when we play live that, we all live in different cities, so it costs money to get together and rehearse. It costs money to do those things. And when you're in a band like that, you can do it because you make enough money to pay for all that. Something like the Denison Kimball Trio, much smaller scale, it would take, to make, even though it's only one other guy, just getting together, rehearsing, stuff like that, there's practicalities involved. I wouldn't mind doing something like that, a similar thing at some point, maybe based with people here in Nashville or other people I know. Nels Klein and I have talked about doing something for a long time. We actually got together and improvised at his house one time. I wish we would have recorded it because we both thought, wow, that was really good. Why didn't we record that? Just kind of freewheeling. I was out in California sniffing around, and I just went over to his house. And so we've talked about doing something. And there's other guitar players I like. There's a guy, Paul TFO Allen, here in town, who's really good. We've done a few things. I don't know about the DK3, but it seems like reunion things, people like that. It would get immediate attention in certain circles, I suppose. I don't know. But I still practice and play that kind of stuff from time to time. Like, I've been home a lot lately, so I've been practicing these jazz play-along things that people use.
Okay.
I went through the Joe Henderson book the other day, and lately it's been a Charlie Parker thing. Some of them I can barely keep up with. And I'll get these other sort of jazz swing sort of play-along things just to keep my foot in the water in that world. And, you have to do it a lot, and you have to really focus and listen, and every now and then I'll think, hey, that sounded pretty good, I should do this, and then I'll have a day like this afternoon where I could barely keep up with this Charlie Parker thing, and I was like, oh, who am I trying to kid? What am I doing here? I need to anyway, so we'll see. Yeah, that's an interesting question, but I don't know. I never rule anything out anymore. I've learned to not do that.
I find it, that's a good point. I find it interesting, too, that, there's a whole legion of Nels Klein fans that only know from his stuff at Wilco, whereas, those Ripper albums, those Nels Klein singers, and that guy is that really interesting, just fascinating guitar player, too. So, yeah, Well, I guess what I'm saying is
and
if
he
you need me to crowdfund something, to to get you guys to make a record together, I'm in. Let's do it.
Oh, we could do it. We could do it easily and cheaply, I think. We'll see,
Yeah, I'd love to hear it. That guy's a fascinating. I mean, you both are fascinating players, but it's something where there's a few ways that I think that could go, and I would also love to see what ways it would go that I would not be able to expect. That'd be very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, something like that, you would want, some of it would have to be totally just free, just freely improvising, and then some of it wouldn't. And some of it I would want it to be composed and arranged and taking advantage of, try to take advantage of the tone and texture of two guitars, playing some hopefully intricately worked out parts. But then you'd have to just let it run off the rails some of the time too. So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, it's a world of possibilities. That for some reason made me think of the ensemble record with Alexander from Storzenda. And is that something we can ever think of? Maybe we might hear some more from in the future. I mean, I know I don't know
about that. Yeah, I don't know about that either. Because once again, him and his wife play together a lot, and they're of course based in Germany still, and they're very nomadic.
I'm having them on actually in a little bit, so I'm excited to talk to them about that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's not impossible. It's a question. It's a question of time with me at this point too. Yeah. I work in a library. Music has become sort of part time for me. I'm not a full musician. I haven't been for the past maybe 4 years. I save up my vacation time and go out and play shows once a year. That's kind of how it's worked out. Which is why I've enjoyed being at home for this last month, because I've really been working on music.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's like, oh, this is how I used to live, practicing hours every day, writing every day, working on new stuff, listening to new stuff every day. But at the same time, I'm glad I'm not, because I wouldn't, if I was, I'd be wiped out right now by the quarantine.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Ensemble, once again, it's practicalities and time.
So speaking of composition, of course, you've done a wide variety of different music and different bands. With the Jesus Lizard stuff, a remarkable group of players involved. What was the normal way that you guys would come together with songs? Was it something where, it's like, here's the guitar riff, like, let's pound it out? Or was it more structured? Like, guys, I got this demo. Let's do this. Like, it's a black box to me. I have no idea how that band operated.
In the early days, I didn't even have a 4-track. David Sims had a 4-track, which you remember 4-track cassette recorders.
I remember well, and I have one about 20 feet away from me, but it's not non-op, unfortunately.
Yeah, and so he had one of those and had a drum machine and that, but I just simply had a cassette tape recorder, and I would with a metronome, I would just play guitar riffs to the metronome and make cassettes. And I even kept that way of doing things even at the very beginning of Tomahawk. Mike Patton will remember getting these, when we talked about doing something, and I said, I'll send you something, and I sent him like a cassette of me playing acoustic guitar with a metronome clicking away.
Right.
And he liked the riffs. I think just having a simple stripped down approach was so different for him. And then as time went on, our different people's recording stuff got better, but even once we got the band going, especially the Jesus Lizard, we were around each other so much. When we lived together. When we weren't on tour, we'd come home, we lived together. So you couldn't hardly do anything without the other guys knowing about it.
Right.
So, you're noodling around on something in your room, and he goes, what was that? That sounded pretty cool. Well, play it when we practice tomorrow when we rehearsed a lot, especially the early days, 3, 4, 5 times a week. And we were always working on new stuff. And more often than not, someone would just throw a riff out there, and we'd play it around and say, okay, what else? Do you got a contrasting part to go with that, or you want me to come up with something? And kind of like that. And then over time, we just kept doing it that way. And I didn't really get any better recording equipment until after the Jesus Lizard. And then I moved to Nashville, and then I've had the 4-track, and then I had the nicer, like a 16-channel digital board, I think the Korg 1600, and that actually could burn CDs. And by this time I had drum machine, and I had a bass and everything, keyboards. I played a bit of keyboards too, and I would make full-on demos, and then we'd get together and actually hash it out, and then rearrange things and all that. And now I use like the Cakewalk free software with an interface just with my laptop and plug in, and I've got a nice, the Helix multi effects. I got the big Helix guitar effects thing, and that has some great amp modeling, so all that stuff. But I still keep it fairly simple. I still like just making simple ideas and then working it out with the group. Because ideas, when you put the stuff in the air, it changes. Right. And then we always shared the songwriting credits and royalties. You know, I saw the Stooges documentary the other night, and Iggy was talking about how we were communists. You know, we didn't, without saying it, we shared it. Well, the Jesus Lizard were, and still are. Like, we always shared royalties equally. No matter who wrote what, it didn't matter. And we always shared the money equally, and everything else. I always viewed it like, didn't matter who wrote it. If you're sticking together, like especially those early days, we were living in a dangerous neighborhood. We'd go out on tour. We'd make nothing. We're playing clubs where you never knew what you were walking into. You know, especially when we went to the West Coast, where none of us had really been to that much. You didn't know if it was going to be a sports bar where they wanted covers, or a biker bar where they wanted to hear blues, or a gay bar where they wanted to hear dance music. You know, we didn't know what, and half the time they hated us, and we just kept going. So after all that, how could you tell someone, oh, by the way, okay, royalty checks, but you don't get anything, when they're literally risking their lives every time they get in that van on the highway?
Right, exactly.
Literally risking your life
Dick
because
move.
You're driving around and all. How can you tell someone, okay, you're not going to get as much as I did? We couldn't, and so that's how that works. Songwriting and everything.
And did you find that, you know, you worked with Steve Albini for a bunch of the stuff, and then you changed producers? So Shot was the first one on Capitol, right? And that was that was the one that. I can't remember who produced
Garth.
that. Sorry. Okay.
Garth.
Cool. Garth. Yeah, there you go. Yep. I mean, obviously, he's done some incredible work, like he did Houdini. You know, he's obviously not a stranger to like weird music. When you guys were making Shot, was there a distinctly different vibe in the composition or recording based on earlier records?
Not in the composition. Not at all. It was still just the same guys writing the same way. Recording, sure. It was definitely a bigger production. There was more time, more money, and just bigger, loud. We did things that we didn't do ever with Steve. I think I remember there being a PA in the studio. And there are things about it that I really like, and things about it I really don't like. And that was the first recording we ever did. It was the early days of computerized editing, and which everyone does now, but not very many people did then. And it became a slippery slope. And once you start doing it on one song, then the other ones don't sound, they sound odd. It doesn't sound like it's the same session, and so then you have to go do other things, and then one thing leads to, and that sort of bothered me. And I don't know, it took a lot longer than to me it should have, and we spent more than we should have, I think. But in other ways, you know, it is bigger, heavier sounding record.
Sure, yeah.
Full sounding, et cetera, though I still like the way Goat and Lyre sound. I think that especially Goat, it was where the spaciousness of the music itself, the arrangements and the playing and everything worked with the way Steve's very simple, very rudimentary way of recording, and with his brand, his style of what type of microphones and all that. It all worked to me on that one.
Yeah,
So,
I think there's a certain timelessness to both those records. I think because it's it's band in a room, and I think there's that's always gonna it's always gonna sound like a band in a room, as it turns out. So
by the time we got to Down, I felt like Down doesn't sound as good as the other ones for whatever reasons. It wasn't quite the same anymore, and it was time to move on. So that was that.
The one thing I definitely did want to ask about, I feel like nobody ever talks about the Last Jesus Lizard record, and I just would really appreciate if you could give me a little context for that last one.
Okay, when you say the last one, you mean the album
Blue?
Oh Christ, with Andy Gill produced.
Andy Gill, the dearly departed Andy Gill. Yes.
Yes. Do we think now that Andy Gill may have died from the coronavirus?
Christ, I didn't even think about that.
Wasn't it like a respiratory ailment?
It was. I believe you're correct. Yeah.
Now, I remember in the 80s he had something like that before. At least I thought I remembered someone telling me that. But I mean, this was right before it hit everywhere else, and then that's what he died from. Is it possible? I think it is.
I think it might be onto something. Like, I don't know. I haven't looked at the timeline or anything. But yeah, I think you might be onto something.
And he traveled, and he traveled a lot. I don't know what his travel situation was prior to that, but I know Gang of Four, they played festivals in Italy. They used to go over there and play. It's possible. Anyway, so yeah, by the time we got to doing that album, we knew, okay, so we had made the other, where we really tried to be at least a little more commercial on Shot. But in other ways it wasn't. It was still a fairly noisy, abrasive, goddamn Jesus Lizard record. But we'd been kind of written off at that point by, the indie hipsters who turned their back on us because we weren't, on Touch and Go anymore. And so people hated us without ever even listening to that damn album. And now, now some of those people are coming around to it and saying, oh, gee, this is pretty good. There are pretty good songs. And we play some of those songs live, and the audience goes apeshit. So, I think we were vindicated in a way. But anyway, so we were still on Capitol, and we still had a budget. And so we were encouraged to experiment and try different things. And we could have also possibly worked with Dave Sardi at that point, and I sort of regret not doing that because he's really great, and I think he would have done great as well. But with Andy, we all loved Gang of Four and thought it might be interesting, and we were encouraged to be experimental, try different things, and that's what we did. But what sort of hurt that session in a way, obviously, is that Mac wasn't playing drums anymore. Mac McNeely had left the band.
You had Jim from the DK3.
We had Jim come in. Jim lived in town. It was a practical move as much as anything. He lived in town. He'd seen us play. He knew all the records. It seemed like an easy fill. But at the same time, playing Mac's parts is not easy, I don't think, for anyone. And when we were playing live, it never sounded the same. It certainly never sounded the same. It never felt the same. The vibe was different at that point within the band, and the days were numbered, and we all knew it. But at least with Andy, he focused on songwriting more than anyone we had worked with, trying to incorporate things. Trying at least some of the time to have songs that had an actual chorus to it and actually have something to lead into the chorus with other things that other people took for granted. Pre-chorus, bridge, intro, middle eight, all those kind of terms, which we never did. We typically, there was the first part and the second part and then this part,
right.
and, you know.
And one of them may accidentally be those things, but it certainly was never thought of ahead of time as like, oh, this is that
no.
thing. Yeah.
But Andy did. He did approach it that way, and he did sort of coach things vocally and lyrically a little more than anyone else had. We spent time with different guitar sounds and textural things. And it just kind of, by this time, I think everyone had moved on for a number of reasons. I feel like the music scene had changed in that things that were popular the first half of the 90s weren't anymore, especially in Chicago, where it seems like post-rock, or what became known as post-rock, seemed to be what everyone wanted. Whether it was Tortoise and Caliphone or Jim O'Rourke or whatever, it seemed like everyone was trying to outsmart each other, and just rocking out was almost frowned on. And so we just kind of fulfilled our contractual obligations and then called it a day. And then I moved to Nashville.
Yeah, so that said, Cold Water does still rip, and it's still a great song, and there's other great tunes on there as well. So it's nice to see that.
Oh, there's some songs, yeah. Like I felt like the first song, I Can Learn.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I almost would like to revisit that in a faster version. I feel like there's one that I thought influenced someone. I thought that there's a chorus and the guitar were in a way. I thought I heard echoes of that on that Nine Inch Nails with Teeth album.
Oh, I can hear it. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. And I like that album. Don't get me wrong. I have respect for that guy, Trent, and I liked that album. But I thought, why does this riff sound familiar? Because I just hadn't listened to Blue in ages.
Yeah. And
it sounded like that. You know, he may have heard it, but I don't know. I don't think.
Maybe it's a subconscious thing. Who knows?
Could be. Yes, everything is.
So last thing, Duane, and I appreciate you spending time with me on the show and talking about all this stuff. It's great, and it's, again, I can't stress enough. It provides a lot of entertainment and value for people in a rough time. So thank you for doing it.
My pleasure, and thank you. I'm appreciative for the attention and for getting a chance to talk. Trust me.
The last thing that I want to ask you is something I always ask people. It's the only thing close to a canned question I have, which is just, why do you do what you do?
More than anything, I think it's a combination of to escape boredom and to get attention. I think it's that simple. And I think that for most musicians, it's that. Whether with attention comes other things. And that was more like when you're young. And like when I was a younger person, even teenager, like young man, even before being what even would be a young man, like a teenager, you're not really a man yet. You're not a boy, but you're not a man. But you want attention. You want everything that goes with it. You want the girls, or boys, if you're into that, whatever. You want the goods. You want the status. You want all those things. And I was no different than anyone else. You wanted to be known for being good at something. You wanted to be appreciated. You wanted to have your craft and your artistic integrity be respected. A quest for respect. Whether people admit it to themselves or not, I think that's as big a part of it as any for anyone, whether it's me or Miles Davis or St. Vincent or whoever. I think that is what drives people. And the other part is just escaping boredom, the boredom of reality. And early on, I just noticed, like with my parents, I grew up in a fairly normal middle-class home. My parents had jobs. They came home at night. You know, they looked after us. We lived in a house. They drove cars. We had a nice, normal, middle-class thing. We went to schools. We went to public school. We always had, decent clothes. My lunchbox always had a sandwich in it. It wasn't fancy. We weren't, they had to watch money. I would overhear them arguing about money. Did you write that check? I told you to wait. Don't write any checks this week, that kind of thing. But we were never poor. But at the same time, I saw that they worked at jobs, them and everyone around us, all my neighbors, relatives, they worked jobs they didn't like. You know, in the Detroit area, it was various, you know, industrial or transportation-related jobs. My mom was a secretary, teacher's aide. Work your lives away at jobs you don't like just to find yourself laid off. In my parents' case, like in Michigan in the 80s, when unemployment was so high and the recession was so bad, the Reagan years, the years of what did they call that? The misery index, inflation times unemployment. The misery. Michigan was off the hook. So I saw people work their lives away at jobs they didn't like, with people they didn't like, putting their dreams on hold for the good of their families, and then just to find themselves high and dry, made redundant. And I thought, I'm going to do everything I can to not have that happen to me, because it seems like no matter what else, anything's going to be better than that. And so for me, it was just, I had to escape that. And for the most part, I did it. You know, I'm not a rich rock star by any means, but I made a decent living I was a professional musician for at least 25 years and managed to save a little money. I met my wife through music, made a lot of friends, etc. And, you know, so now I still do some music, but I work, you know, a decent job with people I like. I've got a few more years where I have to work, and I can actually plan on retiring at some point in a few more years, which is unusual, isn't necessarily a common thing these days.
Yeah, for sure.
But as much as anything, you want to be noticed, and just to not escape the boring, the normal reality of the 20th century, you know, post-industrial landscape. That make sense?
Makes a lot of sense, and that's very poetic in its way, so I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Oh, thanks for asking.
Duane Denison, appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Stay safe.
Conan, thank you. We'll have to do it again in a few years.
Sounds good, man.
All right.
Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Oh, there he goes. Duane Denison. Let's hear a tune. Okay, that was Landshark Part 2 from a little band called the DK3, aka the Denison Kimball Trio. Before that, we had Tomahawk, God Hates a Coward. And before that, 2 from the Jesus Lizard, it was Puss, and then comes Dudley. That's a little Duane Denison block for you. Not even close to touching everything, but got a few things there. Yeah, what a cool guy. All right, so let's listen to some other stuff. What do we want to listen to? Oh, you know what? I got another. This is a situation that I'm going to play something that you may not know, but that you should know. And this is the cover of Lonely Woman, the Tremendo Ornette Coleman, also by the Denison Kimball Trio. Don't worry, we'll get back to the rockin' soon enough. DK3 with The Traveling Salesman. And before that, we had Ensemble, Act 3.
Is this thing on?
And before that, Jesus of Dissociate. Cool! Put it in the books. It's done. Well, that was cool talking to Duane Denison again. Fascinating fella. Again, as I said, maybe talk to him again in a couple more years.
Are we going?
Didn't break any news this time, but still very interesting. Appreciate that guy, everything he does. So it's called Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal.
Test.
It airs on RadioNope.com traditionally Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, 5 Pacific. Lately,
as we come to the close of our broadcast day,
you can find the podcasts and the archives of the episodes at RadioNeutron.com.
farewell transmission.
Any place to find your podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, etc., etc.
Signing off, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all the ships at sea.
iTunes.
Anyone within the sound of my voice.
If you like that show, share with a friend. Let people know about the show. It's always helpful. Thank you.
I've got 50,000 watts of power.
Subscriptions to the show are free. Cast and everything. If you want to get the episode sooner, Patreon.
Ionize the air.
Patreon.com/Protonic Reversal. $1 there. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding.
This microphone turns sound into electricity.
Yeah, Jerry Casali next.
Can you hear me now?
Damn.
Out on Route 128,
Stay safe,
dark
catch
and
you later.
lonely. I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on Earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl! It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, my radio. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now?